Hi, and welcome to the Vintage Computer Federation YouTube channel. Your support helps us with creating videos just like this one and restoring vintage computers for all the world to enjoy. So please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Hello everybody, and now, the unmasking. Welcome to the Vintage Computer Federation West 2022. I have been asked to go through a litany of PTSD. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I'm a video game developer, which happened to be to this day. As a video game developer, I have been dealing with deadlines, products, demands that are sometimes pretty good, reasonable, and others are batshit crazy. This is what happened to me in the year 1995, a year that I will go back to and both cry out in joy and cry out in terror. Early in 1995, I had formed a video game company with a business partner called Logicware. This video game company started doing initially some original games, but we also needed some quick cash. This quick cash came in the form of video game ports. I had already earned a reputation for quite some time doing ports. And since I totally skipped over who the hell I am, I'm Rebecca Heineman. I'm a video game developer who's been around forever. And I started my career in 1980 when I was the national video game champion for Atari 2600 Space Invaders. A tale I told on VCF East. I'm not going to rehash that. Because I'm a video game developer of renown, and I had a reputation for being able to turn around ports relatively quickly, when my waning years at Interplay Productions, I was one of the lead people to do Mac ports. So MacPlay, something like half the ports of MacPlay, I'm the one who did them. So once Logicware became its own company, people then said, hey, can you turn around some ports for us? And of course, from my point of view, it says, got cash? And it's like, you got cash? I got the work. I mean, no job too big, no fee too big. Come on. Well, id Software had a game called Wolfenstein 3D. Now, I'd already been involved in the game with the Super Nintendo version and an Apple II GS version, but I looked at that code base and looked at, the Macintosh version is not that hard to port to the 3DO. So I suggested this. Let's go ahead and port Wolfenstein 3D using the Macintosh code and get it onto the platform. 3.5 months later, the game came out. It was really, really good. 3DO, the way Wolfenstein 3D worked, it worked just fine. Game ran at 30 frames per second on a 3DO. It won several awards. People loved it, especially 3DO. Simultaneously, and I had no involvement in this part, id Software was being approached by numerous companies to put Doom onto the 3DO platform. id Software really knew that Doom would really be difficult to port to the 3DO. So they wanted to have a developer who was willing to put in the kind of money, time, resources, and effort in order to properly do the conversion from PC to the 3DO. So they went ahead and put a price on the license to 3DO for Doom excessively high. Now, they were asking $250,000. Which sounds like a low amount of money today, but back then, on the 3DO market, that was insane. Because the 3DO, top-selling games only sold maybe 100,000 units. And if you did some math, spending $250,000 for doing a game on the 3DO, you're really, really going to have a hard time making money. But not to Art Data Interactive. Ooh, They had come off of a game that they just published called Rise of the Robots, a very mediocre fighting game in the style of Street Fighter. This game they licensed from another developer, they published it, they sold some number of titles, some number of copies, and they were quite pleased with the amount of money they made from selling this game onto the 3DO. So they decided, hey, let's go ahead and make a ripoff of the game Battle Chess. And they called this game Chess Wars, a medieval fantasy. I mean, some really long name. During the time that they were doing this filming, and I'm using this term loosely, was that the game itself was just chess, but whenever a piece takes another piece, unlike Battle Chess from Interplay, which the pieces on the board would do the fighting, they would just simply play a movie, a cutscene of some people dressed up as knights and so forth, and battle each other, and and then they would play that, and that would be essentially the battle. And from what I was told from the people who were actually at the film site, it was a complete and utter nightmare. But someone noticed that one of the costumes that they had for one of the trolls that we're going to be using for the Rook looked an awful lot like a demon from Doom. So they had one of the costume designers create this giant demon head, but they used the same costume for the rest of the body and put on there and saying, look, I'm a demon from Doom. And they filmed about a minute or two of footage in which they were coming up with this idea of a video game cutscene for the game Doom. Never mind that they hadn't actually approached id Software or anything like that. They were just doing this for fun. Well, the CEO of iData Interactive said, we need to do Doom on the 3DO. It's going to have new weapons. It's going to have new items, new stuff like that. I mean, how hard can that be? Put a pin in that. So they went ahead and contacted id Software, and id Software goes like, our data, who are you? Oh, you got a check for $250,000? Now we know who you are. And shortly after the contracts were signed, they then said, okay, here's the CDs you need, which is, of course, a source code to the Doom for the PC and a copy of the game for the PC. And with that, the CEO of Art Data was running around, and this is true. He was going around doing a PR tour talking about how Doom for the 3DO is going to have these movie cutscenes, these new weapons, new levels, new monsters, new everything. At this point in time, the only thing that they had was the source code to Doom for the PC, a copy of the game, and a guy running around in a costume going, yeah, I'm a monster. So, of course, the people at 3DO were listening to this going like, this is great, this is great, this is really going to help our platform because Wolfenstein 3D is a bona fide hit on the 3DO. It's going to help sell so many consoles. So, of course, they would ask Art Data, can we see a beta version? So it's like, yeah, I got the disc right here. It says, when can we see it? Soon. Months go by. When can we see it? Soon. After a while, the guys at 3DO were starting to get a little bit nervous because at this point in time, Art Data had claimed that 2 developers had started the project, and these 2 developers both quit on him. Well, then 3DO said, hey, Becky, remember that you worked on Wolfenstein 3D? And I said, yeah, I just finished it. What's up? It says, well, you know id Software code, right? Yeah. Have you worked on Doom? Yeah, the PC version, some stuff in the background, but that's it. Do those credits translate? Maybe. So it says, well, we got this company who has Doom, and they say the game is 90% complete, and all you have to do is finish the game. That's it. Just finish the game. Now, in English, finish the game means I'm going to get a game with the source code on the 3DO that builds, runs, there may be some bugs, and maybe some levels need to be done. So yeah, I can commit to finishing this game. It'll take a couple of months because I'm going to need at least a month to assimilate the code and another month or two to fix all the bugs, and after that, polish, and then yeah, we'll ship it. So they said, great, you're the developer for us. Let's get you in touch with Art Data Interactive. So of course, spoke with the gentleman. He said, yes, I've got the CD. I've got this. And I said, great. Give me the CD so I can do a review. We'll start this project. And he goes like, the developer, the second developer, hasn't given it to me yet. So, okay, red lights are starting to turn on. At this point, I then said, okay, we'll just do the project, wrote up the contract, he signed, and then the second red light. How about if I pay you after the game ships? At that point, my, red alert, Klingons are coming in. Okay, nope. Cash on the barrelhead. So he gave me a payment of $10,000 to start the project. I says, okay, because $10,000, I can waste a couple of weeks, and if this thing isn't as he says, or it's going to take longer, we'll renegotiate. So a week goes by with me every few hours calling him saying, when can I get the CD? Who is this developer? Maybe I could contact them. What is going on here? So after about 2 weeks of this going back and forth, he then, I kid you not, sent me a couple of floppy disks that had JPEGs of these weapons, these really fancy drawn weapons, and says, here are the new weapons I want you to put in the game. And I'm like, sure, but I can't even build the game. I can't even start this project yet. Now, the clock is ticking. They want this game out by December. This is July. So it's like, okay, stop wasting my time. What the hell's going on? After the second week, that's when I said, I'm done. So I told him I'm going to quit this project because you haven't given me anything. To which he calls up 3DO and says, I am quit the project. He gave me everything I needed, blah, blah, blah. To which they call me in a panic, going like, why did you abandon the project? And I'm like, what project? I haven't gotten anything except a picture of a bunch of weapons. And here, I'll send them to you. Okay, where is the source code to the bloody game? At this point, 3DO now is in a real bind. Under normal circumstances, we would have just told Art Data to go, I'm keeping this $10,000 for wasting my time. Go to hell. Just go frickin' to hell. I'm done here. But 3DO was saying, we already started printing boxes with screenshots of Doom that he gave us. And I'm like, what screenshots? What are you talking about? And so then he sent the people at 3DO, send me these pictures. And there's screenshots with these new weapons, which all he did was took screenshots of the PC version, superimposed the weapons, and put them on there because I could tell that the lighting is all wrong. I said, no, this is a bad Photoshop job. Can't you tell? And that's when 3DO's like, oh no, we're going to have to destroy these boxes. Thankfully, from what I heard, they actually never made it to the printer. But so they cut their losses. But at that moment in time, we didn't know this. So 3DO says, is there anything you could do to salvage this? And I said, let me make a phone call. So I called up id Software, spoke to Carmack, and said, hey, do you have the source code to a port of Doom? Because there is no bloody way I'm going to get the PC version running on the 3DO, period. Because, for one, the PC version required about 4 megabytes of memory. The 3D only had 2. So right there, major problem. And he says, oh yeah, we just finished the Jaguar version. Would you like that? And I'm just like, please! So within a day, I had the CD FedEx to me, and sure enough, there was a CD. In fact, just recently I posted a picture of it on Twitter, just as a reminder to me, like, yeah, this is what started 12 weeks of badness. Because now I took a look at the code, pulled it down. Took me about 2 weeks to go through it, to assimilate it, to learn how it worked, which of course this was a Jaguar version, so it was so integrated into the Jaguar. It was so much I had to un-Jaguar the code in order to get it just to build. But once that 2 weeks and I got the code to build, that's when I then called up 3DO and says, okay, here's the deal. I can do the Jaguar version. The memory fits, everything works. It's going to take me about 6 months, maybe 9, in order for me to re-engineer this entire game to make it work on the 3DO. And their answer was, you got 10 weeks. And that's when I said, okay, alarm bells. I don't think so. Maybe if you doubled the amount of money or something for this port. And I said, well, how about if we paid you, we convinced Art Data to pay you $40,000 to do this port instead of the usual $20, $25. And I says, okay, I could be talked into it. I could probably work with this. So then, got on the phone with the CEO of Art Data, who then said, so when can you put in the cutscenes we've got? And I'm like, cutscenes? No, I'm just gonna deliver you the Jaguar version. And then his answer was, what's a Jaguar? I says like, okay, what's a Jaguar? It's another video game console. It's like, oh, is it one of those things with CDs? Yes. Oh, then we already have the Jaguar version. What do you? No, you don't. I have the code. Well, you just take the CD that says Doom for the PC, you put it into the Jaguar, and it should just boot up just fine. That is when I realized that it's universal. At companies I've worked before, there are people who are producers, CEOs, and upper managers that have no concept what a video game is, and here they are running a video game studio. It's not an isolated thing. This gentleman honestly believed that if you took the PC version of a game, because it's on a CD, and since the Jaguar and the 3DO and the Mac all had CDs, that the game was compatible. And he used as a reference a game that we did at Logicware called Astro Rock. Because Astro Rock, we put it on a hybrid CD so you can run it on a Mac and on a PC, and he thought that translated. So again, I called the guys at 3DO going like, I'm out. And they go like, please, it's a Jaguar version. Okay. At that point, I then decided, okay, I'm a video game developer. I've had to deal with this in my previous companies. I'm going to put on my CEO hat. Hello, Mr. CEO of Art Data. I am the CEO of Logicware, and I will tell you, we will deliver you with all these new weapons and all this new stuff, and I just laid on the bullshit. Just saying, just leave us alone. Just leave us alone. So then we started working, and we were reporting directly to 3DO about our progress, not to Art Data, because whenever we got to Art Data, all I would ever get is a gentleman who was associate producer at Art Data who would come to our office with the new floppies of new weapons that supposedly were drawn, and then he would tell us about the film shoots of this chess wars, and that they're now thinking about doing an actual feature film length of movie of Doom to put into the Doom game. And I'm like, that's nice. I'm not going to do anything with any of that. Nothing. Don't bother my time. Especially when I saw the footage from Chess Wars that he showed me, and I go, okay, if I was a college professor judging film production, these class would fail. It was that bad. So I then went ahead and started working on the title. After about 2 weeks of development, so now I'm only 8 weeks away from we got to ship this thing, I then realized, the Jaguar version doesn't have any sound or music. And that was by design because the Jaguar had to fit on a cartridge, and one of the design decisions was to remove music and sound or at least there was a couple of sounds in there, just like some gunshots, but that's it. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to write a music driver for the 3DO that plays the PC music. And then that's when the CEO of Art Data, when he was once again on the phone begging me to put in these cutscenes, mentioned that he has a band. Light bulb. Kill two birds with one stone. Make him think he's helping out this game, which he was actually, so I will give him that. And B, get him off my back. So I then sat down with the PC version and played every single song in the game into a cassette tape. Yes, we were still high-tech in 1995. But once the cassette tape was made, I then sent that to Art Data, and I told him, I need you to use your band and play these songs. And he goes, on it. To which he would be happily sending me every 2 or 3 days a new track of like E1M1, the opening song, then the next song, and the next song. And he even did the bunny song, which is the bunny heads on a pike. So I had to, of course, put that inside the game because, come on, bunny with a head on a pike, gotta have it. But nevertheless, I was sitting there realizing as time goes on, sleep is for the weak. Hygiene is for the weak. A cot in the back of your room is a necessity, because I was on the computer for 8 weeks nonstop, constantly making changes, figuring out how to fit the data into the 3DO, finding all the flaws of the 3DO, such as like on the 3DO's ARM processor, it doesn't have a 16-bit read or write instruction. It can only read or write bytes or 32-bit words. And a lot of the data structure in Doom was 16 bits. So I had to redo all that. And of course, it was 16 bits because it was for the Jaguar using a 68K, so go figure. So constantly redoing it, refactoring it, go to sleep, go, get up, refactor, keep working. And then every now and then I would get this a new thing saying, here's another song. Oh, by the way, I got a new idea for a level. So yeah, you keep thinking about that new idea for a level. Yeah, we'll put that in Doom 2 or Doom 3 or I'm in fucking hell. So after the game was about 2 weeks from shipping, I actually had the game that you could play it from start to finish. The people at 3DO were amazed, except for one small, tiny problem. The game only ran at 8 frames per second. Yeah, it did run, and it was bug-free, and it loaded every single level, and it was playing the tracks of music that I was given, but 8 frames per second. So, even the guy from Art Data Interact was saying, man, this game really is a chuggy frame rate. So I had to put in a frame rate counter on there. And sure enough, it shows 6, 9, 8. Except, of course, for the build I gave to him. Whatever the frame rate number was, I multiplied by 2. He bought it. But the people at 3DO were like, we really need this at least 15 frames per second. And that's where the compromise came in which I would just take the game screen, shrink it down to something like about 1/4 of the real estate. And you could select it for larger, but that's what it defaults to, is a small screen. And it actually got 15 frames per second consistently. So with that, and then testing the game, doing little quirks to make it actually playable with the joypad, and of course, thank goodness, despite the fact that the guy from Art Data kept asking, where's the network play? On a platform that doesn't support network play. Because, PCs do it, so obviously, never mind. We finally get the game golden mastered, sent it off to 3DO for final, testing, and I was sitting there in my office saying, please don't crash, please don't crash, please don't crash. I need to sleep. Please don't crash. And sure enough, it actually didn't crash. This game worked and was then, mastered at 3DO, and the 3DO said, great, we'll go ahead and give this over to Art Data Interactive so they can go ahead and get the boxes ready and get it out to the stores. And I was like, oh, good, for the 5,000 users of the 3DO who buy this game, because that's the average number of people who buy a game on the 3DO at that time, the CEO of Art Data decided, no, I need more money. I spent so much money developing this game, including I had to pay Rebecca her full amount because she held the CD hostage until I gave her the money to pay for the port job. Otherwise, it wasn't going to be done. And yes, that's what I did, because I knew, because the assistant producer that I mentioned, who kept coming as our liaison, told me he was planning to stiff me. He was very, very good, this assistant director, in telling me, oh, what's really going on over there? And really, I only did this for 3DO because I did not do this for Art Data Interactive. But once I held the disc hostage, he then wired me the money. I sent him the disc, sent the disc to 3DO. They mastered it, gave it to him, and then he promptly pressed 50,000 copies of it. To put it in perspective, the #1 selling game ever on the 3DO sold about 150,000 copies, but that was like the pack-in. The #2 selling was like about 35,000, 40,000 units. So the odds it was ever going to sell 50,000 units of Doom for the 3DO was between 0 and 0, somewhere in that area. So of course, somewhere in New Mexico, I am certain right by the ET cartridges is a pile of 3DO discs and packages, unless he's like using them as a bed or something, I don't know. But after that, I'm like, no, I'm never doing this again. I love you, 3DO. I don't love you that much. And I'm like, oh God. And I just still, to this day, wondering how the hell did I finish that game? Does anybody have any questions before I go into a little corner in the place and weep? Over there, gentlemen. Okay, the question is, if I had more time or something, did I write some of the code in assembly? And the answer is, actually, I did. It turned out that when I was developing Wolfenstein 3D, I discovered that numerous libraries and their standard C libraries were buggy. So I went ahead and rewrote most of them in ARM assembly, and I got them to run really, really fast, and they were ANSI compliant. And that is what I used as a basis for most of my games on the 3DO. If you looked at the source code to Doom for the 3DO that I put up on GitHub, you will find a folder called Burger, and you're going to find a bunch of assembly language functions in there. Now, the game itself, I never got to the point where I can actually rewrite several functions in assembly because I'd rewritten a lot of them in C so that the compiler actually generated good assembly code, so it didn't need to go any further. The thing that was the bottleneck that I know right now that would be the first thing I would fix is while the wall textures were drawn with the cell engine, which meant that it was using hardware acceleration, the floor and ceiling tiles were all drawn with software rendering. And that was because I just didn't have time to rewrite those functions into something that was compatible with the cell engine or write them in assembly. So it's one of those where, had I had more time, one little anecdote was that as I mentioned, the postage stamp size could be increased or decreased by certain controls on the menu selection screen, but you couldn't actually make the game full screen unless you used a cheat code. That cheat code was in there because of Art Data's demands. Art Data demanded that in order for me to fulfill my contract, the game had to run full screen. I said, well, the game can't run full screen at the target frame rate, but 3DO is coming out with this new machine called the M2. So if they buy an M2 and then they run 3DO Doom, we'll just publish the cheat code, they'll run a full screen, 30 frames per second, problem solved. And they bought that. Next question? Okay, right there, the one who just stood up.
So can you take us through your development workstation for this? Like specs, what did you use, what environments?
Oh, you're not going to believe me when I'm telling you right now. You are not going to.
That's what I want to know.
Okay. The 3DO's main development environment was MPW. You use the Macintosh Programmer's Workshop with a plugin that allows you to compile 3DO code, which is ARM. Everything was done on MPW using a Mac. It was a Mac. In my case, I used a Mac Quadra 800, which still sits under my desk. Good old Bessie. She's faithful. And I had a PowerPC upgrade in it, so therefore I did run using PowerPC native tools in MPW. Although all of the compilers I was given to by 3DO, the Norcroft compiler was written in 68,000. And just so you know, we call the Norcroft compiler the Norcroft compiler in the 3DO development world. However, all the audio, all the levels, all the data was manipulated and generated on an Apple IIgs. Because I had an Apple IIgs, and that IIgs was the machine I did my primary development on. I wrote the source code of Doom for 3DO on a IIgs using Merlin, the assembler's editor, and then I had a shared volume that I would just hit save, and I did it in save mode, and then there was another tool which converted it from Merlin text to ASCII text. That was part of the build system, and then it would just build the code for me. Because I liked using the Apple IIgs, and I was so familiar with it that I was developing like half of my Mac games using that. It wasn't until later that I started evolving with Code Warrior before I finally switched from the IIgs to Mac native development. But like the levels were processed with the IIgs. There was a tool I called Slicer, which was originally developed on the IIgs using Orca C. And that's what I used to cut out all the 3DO art for both Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. But yeah, I was the person at Interplay that which you could pry my IIgs from my cold dead fingers. And yeah, I used that IIgs for development all the way up to like 1997. That was pretty much when I stopped. I basically started moving everything over to the Mac and the PC. Next question. Yes. Oh, that's another story. I had a Transwarp GS, then later on I replaced it with a zip chip. I actually was behind the scenes working with the people at Zip Technologies developing the zip chip. So I had a 14 megahertz zip chip inside of my 2GS in 1992. And since then, in fact, it was for a period of time, people at Interplay were saying like, okay, Becky has the fastest computer in the office, even though it's a 2GS, because she hand-built half the components in it. I mean, I had a Axlon RAM disk for floppy emulations so that the floppies were mastered on RAM and then written out. I had a interface card I built which allowed you to interface to both an Atari 800 and a Commodore 64 disk drive with my Apple II using ProDOS. So I just take a Commodore disk, put it in there, format with ProDOS, put files on there, and then put it onto the C64 and it would run just fine. For proof, look at the game Task Times in Tone Town for the C64. If any of you look at it with a sector editor, look first at track, I think it was 13 or 14, I may be wrong, which is the actual Commodore 64 track. And there's a Commodore 64 catalog there with a file called ProDOS. Then if you go to track 0, which is where the Apple II would store the catalog, you would find an Apple II boot block, an Apple II directory. All the files are there for task times listed as Apple II ProDOS things, because the way the game ran is you ran this little stub, which essentially loads my interpretation of ProDOS. It then loads it into the C64, switches over to the ProDOS operating system, and then does the Apple II type boot. Yeah, go ahead and take a look. I dare you. Next victim? Yes.
So Jaguar has 64 chip coprocessor, a 32 and a 63, or has a single CPU and no. So if you have another source code other than Jaguar, could it be better? Like, I don't know, something closer, Big Mac?
Okay, first I'm going to have to correct you there. You see, the people at Atari were working at Art Data for some reason. Because you see, when they say 64-bit, the way they mean it is that you have a 64-bit CPU known as a 68000, and then you have, it's actually a 32-bit processor, 60,000, and then you have a 32-bit processor, which is their RISC chip. So 32 plus 32 is 64. I have a 64-bit CPU. There is no 64-bit instructions. I will tell you that right now. It is a 32-bit machine now, however, several of the buses are actually 16-bit on the Jaguar. This was because the main 68000 is only a 16-bit bus processor. So therefore, there is no need to put in a 32-bit bus if your processor doesn't even have the lines. But the RISC chip is truly 32-bit. So when you're running code on the 32-bit RISC chip on the Jaguar, it runs full 32-bit, 32-bit speed, memory accesses, etc., which was why Doom for the Jaguar had several subroutines that what it did was copy it into this RISC chip's memory, executed the code, take another piece, executed the code, and because that was such a fun thing, they did it again on the Sony PlayStation 3. Because anybody who knows the Sony PlayStation 3 knows that the cell engine is 8 CPUs that are running on its own little thing, and you have to upload code, run, upload code, run. So Atari did it first. Next victim? Any other questions before I go run screaming in the night? Yes, you again. And I'll get you next. Yeah. The question was that who is the other members of the team, because I did mention a team. That would have been nice. You see, in order for you to add on people onto a project, you need to first onboard them, meaning that you have to set them up with the machines, setting up stuff. Now, that's not a problem. We had that. But getting them to assimilate the code, issuing tasks, doing that stuff, we didn't have time for that. I mean, had I had a 9-month development problem, no problem. So no, I'm the poor bitch who had to do every freaking line of code in that damn port. Either that or it wasn't going to make the deadline. Because the sad part is when you have a team, there unfortunately is some overhead that needs to manage the team, and we didn't have the time to set up that overhead. And back over there, yes?
So what was, two things, what was, after you delivered the code, without any of the new stuff our data wanted, what was their reaction to that? And second, what was, when the game came out, the public reaction to the game?
Okay, two-part question. First one was, when I delivered the code of the game, it literally was the Jaguar version ported over. So when they are asking, hey, where are all the new weapons? Where are the new cutscenes and so forth? My response to them was, you never gave me those cutscenes, so sorry I couldn't put them in. And it was true, because every time the guy comes by with the CD, I would say, hey, can you do me a favor and not bring that? Can you just bring me the audio? Don't bring me anything else, because I need plausible deniability. And again, they bought it. The other question you had was, what was it again? Oh, public reaction? Oh, it was barbecued for every reason. I mean, the funny thing was, we got 5 stars out of 5 for the music. And I think that was the only reason we didn't win the Razzie that year. You aren't?
So can you compare and contrast your development experience on Doom for the 3DO with some of the later Macintosh development environments? You mentioned you built some stuff for Macintosh, right?
Yes.
Can you compare like Bugdom and Nanosort, the experiences there?
Oh, well, Bugdom and Nanosort, okay, to put it in perspective, there was a time in which I was doing a port of 2 Macintosh games called Bugdom and another one called Nanostor, and there was another one called Enigmo 2. There was a whole bunch from a company called Pangea, and my job was to convert them from the Mac to the PC. And they were originally developed under Code Warrior for the Mac, which is, to this day, I still think it's one of the most awesome development environments on the Mac ever. In fact, I even still use it occasionally on the PC. But the development environment, at least the compilers worked. Because, you know, if I set to optimizations like middle grade, I would still have a very high probability that the code's going to work bug-free, and the bugs were basically from me. Whereas I put optimization level 3, yeah, you're rolling some dice. But at least you had the choice. It's not like the Norcroft compiler, where if I just typed in O with, you know, levels 1 or something like that, you're really like, hey, feeling lucky? So, but however, you know, modern development environments, Xcode, I'm not a fan. I use it only because I have to, but I try to avoid it as much as possible. Currently, Windows, Visual Studio has made me a believer. I really do like Visual Studio as it is today. And besides, I can create plugins and things like that. So I'm able to do development on other platforms using these plugins I've written. So I'm still being the really naughty bitch that I've always been. Yes, your question.
What were your favorite video games? Why and wrong answers?
Okay, why are my favorite video games? And what was the second part? On the 3DO. Wrong answers only? Well, in that case, my favorite game has to be Rise of the Robots. I mean, come on. Either that or like any of the XXX games that came out on the 3DO, because trust me, those are quality titles. I mean, on 2600, come on. Who hasn't played Customer's Revenge? Come on. Yes? You said, what was the question? Yeah, some of them are already up on GitHub. HLSL, there's an HLSL compiler that's up there on GitHub. The only thing I need to update them all because it appears that my EV code signing certificate expired, and I'm fighting with the SSL.com to get me a new one. Once I get that all set up, I can then re-push the exes up there, because signing a VSIX file is a pain in the rear. MSI files and exes, no problem, but Visual Studio plugins, I'm going to start working on Doom. That's a lot better. Next victim? Anybody else before I go ahead and kick you all out? Yes. They do, actually, but when I approached the person who possesses them, they told me in foul language I have never experienced in my life. It appears not getting paid leaves a mark. But however, though, I have done a lot of research on this, and I've spoken with a lot of people about it, but I do know who has it, but the trouble is that there is no movie, so don't even think about it. What had happened was that they were playing around with the costume, as I've mentioned, and they filmed about a minute or 2 worth of footage. So there's about maybe 2 or 3 hours of cuts and takes that they did. There were scenes of a guy dressed as a Space Marine and a woman dressed as a Space Marine, just in poses with guns. And all the poses are is that they would just be running around a corridor, just holding their guns to nothing in sight and just saying things. Then you have one scene where there's like they use the rigging for the lights to pretend it's a cord or something like inside of a spaceship, put some smoke machines there, and had the guy in the suit just do this. And then they did a couple of promotional photos of the guy in the monster suit holding the girl and the guy holding the gun to the monster. But those are just all posed pictures. They didn't actually film anything. The intent was to film essentially cut scenes to basically do a movie of the quality of the version of Doom, the movie with The Rock. And that would have made the movie with The Rock win an Academy Award by comparison. So as a result, yeah, there is footage. The only other thing that I know is that they used that same costume at an E3 of 1995 to promote Doom. And this is the time when 3DO and I weren't even involved. They were having this guy running around in a demon suit saying, this is going to be Doom. And it's like, but they don't have anything at the time. So, yeah, go figure. Yes, the one in red.
My apologies if I'm not using the right terminology for this question. This isn't my wheelhouse. But this is a story of surviving the many constraints that weren't in your favor. What is your most, thriving story under constraints like that where you felt really proud of
Well, thriving is basically projects that I worked at Old School and at Contraband Entertainment, which my first rule is that 40-hour work weeks, mandatory weekends off. In fact, I had one guy I found that was doing check-ins on the weekend, and I actually turned off the Perfor server to keep them out, saying, no, go with your girlfriend, just go. And it turned out that we shipped all of our products on time. Funny that. Now, also, one thing that we did is that well before the game was going into development, we would do, halfway through this development, we would say, do we realistically think we can add these levels in the game? And anytime someone would say, well, what if I work nights? And I would say, shut up. And at that point, we would then say, okay, these levels, they're going to go in the sequel. If the game does real good, we'll do those levels or do a DLC, but we're going to make this game. And what happens is that everybody who works at Old School is very happy working there. I actually pay health benefits. So it's amazing how you motivate people by giving them health care. That's where it thrives. I mean, we're going to be releasing Astro Rock, a remastered version from 1995 now. In fact, I just got the domain back of astrorock.com. So that's why I could talk about it, because I now have the domain. Development thrives when you actually understand that human resources are human. When you understand that, and that these are people who have lives, and sometimes they have grieving when either a pet dies or a family member dies, which pets are family members, for crying out loud. But however, as long as you realize that, don't put them into crunch, because I've been in crunches. And it took me, after I heard that Doom 3DO was going into production, I went home for 3 weeks. And I said, don't talk to me. I'm just going to sleep. I'm just going to watch TV. I'm not going to do anything. I need to unwind. And that's not fun. And then as an anecdote, I had a career over at Electronic Arts for a period of time. And we were doing this game called, which falls back into a game that worked perfectly. We were doing a game called Medal of Honor European Assault. We planned out the game. We did the whole, you got to be working 9 to 5, got to be working only no weekends, etc. And we actually shipped the game, and it was bug-free, and it won all these awards. So to our horror, when we saw that there was someone named LA Girl, or EA LA or something, EA Spouse, that's it, saying how it was so horrible at Electronic Arts, we were like, that's got to be wrong. We were on the second floor. EA Spouse was on the fourth, working on Battle for Middle-earth. We went up to Battle for Middle-earth. In about 10 minutes, we realized, oh, yeah, that's why EA Spouse was here. But it goes back to, who's your manager? Does your manager get it? Because if you have a manager whose only God is a spreadsheet, then they will try to work everybody to the bone, not understanding that there is a law of diminishing returns. Once a person works after 8 hours, then their productivity goes down. And once they work about 11 hours, then the next day their productivity starts at a lower number. And it just gets worse and worse and worse until now you've got this room full of warm bodies and nothing's getting done. There are many studies with the IGDA about crunch. I suggest you look into that. Google IGDA game industry crunch to get the report. And I'm a firm believer that anybody who resorts to crunch is a bad manager. I went through hell, so you don't have to. Any last questions before they boot me off the stage? Ah, there we go. We got another customer.
It just baffles me that cultural cynicism that sometimes permeates our field. The guy is trying to steal you, you're trying to deliver, you're trying to cut them off, and it's a dog game, right? And nobody cares about the final product, about the quality, about the, I don't know, it's just something that I see in several places in the industry right now.
Yeah, well, it's not just the game industry, it's pretty much every industry, is that there are people out there who believe that if you get a licensed product, you can put poop in the box and it will sell. And sometimes they're actually right. So therefore, the quality doesn't matter if the game has a known property and it's very popular, then they don't bother. They spend all their money on licensing the property and put almost nothing in the development of whatever it is they're making. Yeah. Yeah. Now, for me, what was the real motivation for me doing 3DO Doom? And that was to build a relationship with 3DO. Was that I had already built a big relationship with them by delivering Wolfenstein 3D for the 3DO. And it was a beautiful game, and it really showed off what their hardware can do. So therefore, because of that reputation, they thought I was going to be a miracle worker and pulled the Doom 3DO project out of the trash fire. I did, but it was still covered in napalm and got everybody burned. But it then, afterwards, I did reap benefits because 3DO then started hiring us to do their ports, which is what ended up with our company, Contraband Entertainment, to do the port of Heroes of Might and Magic 4 to the Mac. They were even talking to us about doing their Armyman franchise and so forth. And we were actually starting the talks to sell our company to 3DO. And I would have made pretty good money had 3DO not gone bankrupt the next week. Oh well, but that's what you can do. Any last questions? Okay, the lady back there in the white mask.
I think that the part of the reason I asked kind of a goofy question was because 3DO, it always seems to me, had this really good hardware. Like, as far as library, things never really happened. So the hardware is what really needs 3DO. Do you think that if things had turned out differently, maybe how 3DO managed or how the developer managed, maybe it was done better?
Okay, your question is about the 3DO in and of itself, that there were things about it not being as powerful or as popular, or what is that? I'm trying to understand.
It's more about it seemed like 3DO had a lot of potential that wasn't realized.
Okay. The question is, the 3DO had a lot of potential. In the end, it wasn't realized. And the issue was not because of the 3DO hardware and the 3DO development, et cetera, because when the 3DO was conceived by Trip Hawkins, former CEO of Electronic Arts, he had a good idea, but the idea wasn't quite baked. And that means that it's half-baked, and you know what that means. When you have an idea that's half-baked, it means that because you didn't think it through, it was going to fail from day one. The issue was, he thought, why not create the new Betamax? And when I say Betamax, I'm referring to create the technology for a cassette tape. Then you license that technology and format to companies that would make VCRs, Then you would also get a licensing fee from everybody who buys these tapes so they can make their videos and so forth on it. And then you also sell blank tapes to consumers, and everybody who is using this technology is sending you a licensing fee. So in the end, all you do is create the technology, sit back as the bulldozers come in with your money. And now this was what happened with VHS. VHS, the consortium that developed that standard, made a lot of money. He wanted to do that, but with a video game console. But he totally forgot that video game consoles back then, as it is today, it hasn't changed. You sell the console at cost or less. It's like you giving it away, because then you make all your money by selling the software. Or nowadays, Xbox Game Passes and stuff. Because once the console's in the hand and people are forking over your $49.95 a year or so forth, that's where all the profit is. The problem is that with the 3DO, they had to have everybody making 3DOs make profit, so the consoles had to be sold at a profit, which is why the 3DO launched at $799, and which, at that time, everybody's most expensive consoles were $299. So already you're charging almost triple for everyone else's. Plus, in order to even get a better profit margin, they had to use cheaper components, such as because originally the 3DO was only supposed to have 2 meg of memory on it total. The 3DO actually shipped with 3. The reason? The operating system takes a meg. So therefore, it only leaves you with 1 meg. And when you're competing against other consoles that had at least 2 meg of memory to work with, the 3DO was already hobbled, so they had to put an extra meg of memory in there, which was expensive in 1994. That's when the 3DO was, 1993, 1994 is when the 3DO came out. Then you, of course, had the problem of the fact that they put an ARM CPU in there that was running only at 12 megahertz. It was intended, they wanted to have 3DOs built into TVs. They wanted 3DOs built into VCRs. I mean, they wanted the chipset to be something really, really cheap. Heck, they made a ISA card called the 3DO Blaster, where you could just put into your PC and play 3DO games. So they wanted that hardware everywhere, but of course, everybody making a 3DO was supposed to write a check to Trip Hawkins so he can build another yacht. However, the issue is that because the consoles were so expensive, nobody was buying them. So they had to keep selling them at cheaper prices, and it ended up that 3DO itself was actually subsidizing the manufacturers, Samsung and Panasonic most notably, so they were able to introduce 3DOs at $299. But by then, it was already too late because this thing called the PlayStation showed up. And once that showed up, it basically ate the 3DO for dinner. And then, of course, the 3DO company did what Adam Osborne learned a long time ago. Do not announce your new product before you clear the channel of your old product. Which is, they announced that they're going to have this new machine called the M2. So everybody stopped buying 3DOs so they can wait for the M2. And, well, that's when 3DO just simply curled a little ball and blew up. Lesson to be learned. Look at history, which is what we're all about here. I mean, this is the Vintage Computer Federation. We're supposed to look at our history, and if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat it, and this is an example. Next one. All right, and I think it'll be... Sure do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have the zip... I'm taking care of that thing. It still has a source code to pretty much every game I've ever written. So once I get enough time in my life, I'll be able to actually upload all that to GitHub, which is one of my bucket lists before I stop moving. So there you go. All right. I think I'm going to be ended here, and thank you very much for coming to my talk.